Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm James Farr. What would it be like to go to a restaurant, eat, receive the check, but not have to tip? Tips are typically given based on quality of service. The better the service, the better the tip. In many countries, the tip is included with the price of the meal, but not here. We asked some consumers on the street what they think about tipping.
I think it's important to tip because minimum wage already isn't enough, I feel. So tipping adds, like an extra little money in someone's pocket. You never know what people are going through. I'm pretty sure everyone has their own financial ruts. So it never hurts, just to show extra love or so.
Most, if not all, servers kind of rely on tipping to make living wages, so I feel it's really important.
I think that it should be kind of like thanking the person that just served you in a way for their service. And if they did a good job, you give them like a good tip. And if they didn't, you just give them like a basic tip.
Yeah, I think tipping is important if the worker isn't getting paid a cost of living.
Some people think tipping is unfair and gives too much power to the consumer. Also, tips don't always add up to a living wage, and a lot of servers say they struggle to make ends meet. One way restaurants are combating that issue is by paying their servers more and including the tip in the price of the meal. We asked some restaurant servers what they think about tipping and the new hospitality included policy.
I rely on it for my income. That's the way I make my money. I don't really receive paychecks, so tipping in my line of work, it's pretty important.
A lot of people that aren't waiters, they think that we get paid a lot or that we make a lot of money, but actually we don't. And what they don't know is anytime you order beer, we have to tip out the bartender, we have to tip out the bussers, and if you guys don't tip the waiter anything, it actually comes out of our paycheck.
I think that people think that we get a minimum wage, so that's going to be enough to cover everything, but a lot of those wages go to paying my taxes on the people's bills and then the taxes on my tip in general.
I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, to be really honest with you. I think it can be a good thing and a bad thing. I think it would depend on how much they're actually paying them an hour, because for a lot of people it could end up being a huge pay cut.
Anytime you order a beer, just make sure if you order a beer, just make sure to tip. Just don't leave no tip, because then that comes out of our pocket.
If I'm not getting a good enough tip, say even 10% or something like that, most of that goes immediately to food runners and bar people, so it's not really going to me. And if we don't get tipped enough, we actually end up paying out in taxes to wait on a table.
For the consumer end of it, if you're coming into a restaurant or a place of business and you're not having that pressure of, I have to tip, that expectancy, then I feel like 9 times out of 10, the dining experience can be better for you. But at the other end, if there's not necessarily that incentive for the serving staff to make that money and they're just getting paid hourly, I think one could argue that service could go down. But then one could argue that service could go up too as well.
I mean, I like taking home money at the end of my shift personally, but it is hit or miss. Some days you make 30, some days you make 200. So it's a good day or bad day, but personally I like taking home money at the end of my shift.
I think it would depend on the wage increase itself and whether or not people would still be allowed to tip or if they were discouraged to tip, because there's a difference between giving normal service and giving really good service, where those people probably do deserve a little bit more money than, say, someone else.
On Point's Kelsey Henderson has more on the story.
Thanks, James. So now I'm going to introduce our guest. First, we have Art Shulman, who is a CSUN marketing professor in the business school and a restaurant goer. And we also have Andrea Borgen. She's a restaurant owner of Barcito in downtown Los Angeles. Thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So we just heard servers talk about the importance of tips and tipping in their industry and their line of work. So I wanted to ask the both of you, does it improve the restaurant experience for everyone if servers are tipped? Andrea, let's start with you.
It's a loaded question. I think the tipping model has been broken for quite some time. I think the idea of putting the onus of paying employees fairly on the guests that are dining in the restaurant as opposed to the restaurant owners and managers themselves is incredibly flawed. There are states that still have a tipped minimum wage, which is $2.20, I believe. And so those employees are truly 100% dependent on those tips. And I think unfortunately, it's gotten to a point of no return almost. And so with our model, we're really kind of trying to make that a little bit more equitable again.
Okay. And Art, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if you eliminate the tipping and just include it in the price. I don't know what would happen in terms of the wages for the servers. I mean, maybe it would increase, maybe it would decrease. I can talk about what it is to me, what I would prefer as a consumer. I don't know what would happen if it would be beneficial to the servers or not to do that.
Okay, and why do you both think that tipping has become such a controversial, issue? And yeah, go ahead. Art.
Well, one reason I guess is that servers, many of them don't make as much money as they like, and the issue of adding a fee to the price automatically has come up. So other than that, I'm not really an expert in the restaurant business, so I don't really know why it's come up more frequently.
Yeah. Well, Andrea?
Yeah, tipping I think is incredibly unstable. It varies on a night-to-night basis, and there have been countless studies that have shown that it's sexist and racist and completely depends on that guest's mood on that particular day, and to have someone's income based on such kind of extraneous factors is hugely problematic.
Well, Andrea, we know that you actually took to the hospitality included system with your restaurant. So I wanted to know, why did you decide to take on that format?
So many reasons. I think tipping is problematic for all the reasons that I've already listed. It also creates huge inequality gaps between the front of house and the back of house. The back of house is not allowed to partake in tips. With this DOL legislation coming through right now, that could change, but when I made this decision 2 years ago, that was the case. And to create a work environment in which I'm able to provide stable wages to my employees, all of my front of house employees, instead of having tips, they now participate in a revenue share model, which is based on weekly sales. And so their income is stabilized much more dramatically. On average, they make the same amount that they used to make when they were making tips. It's just not as many peaks and valleys. We're able to pay the kitchen a little bit better as a result, and we're also able to provide health insurance to all of our full-time employees, which I think is a really meaningful departure for this industry.
And you talked about your sales, you mentioned that. I wanted to ask, how much has your menu prices raised since the change?
Yeah, so we did have to bump up menu prices in order to kind of account for all of these changes. On average, menu prices increased by about 22%, and it kind of varied based on value perception and product mix. But the idea was, at the end of the day, for the guest to still pay the same amount for the same experience, but on the back end of things, we are distributing those funds in a different way.
All right, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I just don't know whether or not, if just from the customer, from my point of view, I could just talk really, I can't talk from the business point of view because I don't know it. I can talk about from my point of view what I like about tipping. One big issue is, of course, this is in general, whether service declines, if you're guaranteeing people money, to what extent does service decline? People don't have to work as hard maybe to make their money. They're going to get paid anyway. So I don't know to what extent. I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens. There is that issue. I know that there are servers that I've talked to at places that I go. I go to one coffee house regularly, probably at least once a week, and I've asked the servers there, and they said they don't like the idea. Not that they don't do it there, but they don't like the idea because she gave an example. One server, for example, she said, I went to this other place and the service was terrible. I didn't want to leave 20%. The service was terrible. So, so you wonder to what extent the service is going to decline if servers don't have to make tips. Okay. I have some other reasons too. But ask your questions. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, I mean, you working in that industry and working with servers, has it been hard to have find new servers to work in your restaurant? Or?
We've had relatively little to zero turnover in the front of house. I think, our employees are really happy with the model, and I think, maybe they're able to make a little bit more money elsewhere, but the idea that they have a really stable wage and are provided health insurance And then I think, the overall culture of the restaurant as well, and sort of how team-oriented it is, we really have had little to no issues with turnover.
So would you say the system is working for your restaurant?
Yeah, I think there are other issues when it comes to guest sticker shock and volume and sort of how all of those metrics are measured. But I think internally, from a staffing standpoint, yes, 100%.
What would you say one of the challenging things has been?
Yeah, I think, the fact that our prices are a little bit higher, and I think, unfortunately, guests, even though we have all kinds of iconography and logos and language to really explain this model, it's really not until at the end of their experience they receive their closed out credit card with no tip line on it that they understand, oh wow, I don't have to add an additional 20% to this. And so there is a sticker shock, whether guests are looking at our menu prices and not coming in at all, or they're coming in and their ordering behavior changes when they're inside the restaurant. I do think that there has been some fallout as a result of that.
Okay, well, Art, I want to ask you this. From the customer's perspective, do you enjoy the power of giving a tip to a server?
I think the word power is loaded.
Thank you. I agree.
But I do like the ability to control whether, the amount that I'm leaving. I want to give one example. I once met somebody at a coffee shop for a meeting. It was middle of the afternoon, after lunch, before dinner. We're there for coffee, and I had a coffee and an English muffin. I was there for a very long time. Okay. The tip that I left was way over 20% because I was taking the person's time. I was sitting at the table for a long time. And I like being able to do that. If I give a larger than normal tip, I like to be thanked. I like to be appreciated. I go to one place over and over again, and they appreciate what I do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, actually, Andrea, I had a Andrea, actually, I had a question about that. What if there are customers who are like, man, this server was above and beyond, and I actually want to tip and give a little extra? What do you do in that circumstance?
Yeah, overall, we discourage that guests leave a tip just because, everyone is really well taken care of, and we don't want to skew the value of the experience. I do think that we have an issue with sticker shock, and so saying, these are the prices, and that's it. That's the end of it. I think it can be really powerful. And so, if it's a credit card, we have absolutely no way of processing it. If guests insist on leaving cash, even though we'll kind of politely decline, we're not going to chase them out the door with it either. And so, if they are really, really insistent, at the end of the day, it still is the hospitality industry. We're not going to fight with a guest over this. But we would prefer that they not leave a tip so that, it feels, wow, what a deal that was.
And yeah, so what I talk about the power, you guys thought that was a loaded word, of the customer providing a tip to the server. What about, the server's power? Like the server, is the one handling the food. So do you ever stress about people coughing or sneezing on your food, or have you ever been afraid of waiters?
No.
No.
Actually, I read an article about where the dirtiest place in the restaurant is. One of them is the table that you're on, wherever you're sitting, because depends if it has a tablecloth on it, because they wipe it off with very often a dirty rag. That's a dirty place. Don't have ice in your drinks because there's germs in the ice maker. So I'm not worried about the waiters. I'm more worried if there's germs. I'm more worried about other ways of getting germs than the waiters coughing or anything like that, or touching it or anything like that.
And how do you handle that from a business or a restaurant owner's perspective of just customers having that fear or not really trusting the servers? How do you, reestablish that trust with them? Or do you just trust your servers to do their job?
I mean, I think, part of the beauty of this model is it really does empower your employees to feel like they have ownership in the business. They are driving those top line sales and they get to share in that success. And I think, I worked for Danny Meyer's restaurant in New York, and he was the one that sort of propelled this model and is applying it to his restaurants in New York City. And his sort of philosophy, it's called Enlightened Hospitality, Enlightened Hospitality. And the philosophy is that if you take care of people in a certain order, employees are always first, then guests, then vendors, then your community, then your investors.
Oh, wow.
And his philosophy is that if you always put the needs of your employees first, everything else will take care of itself. The trickle down works. And having worked for that restaurant group and having seen it myself with my own restaurant, I 100% believe in that.
I do have one question. So we talked about the positive of someone wanting to receive a tip. What if, or wanting to give a larger amount of tip? What if there's a person who's like, you know what, I did not like the service here. I don't want to give this person a tip, and I don't want the tip included in my, in price of the meal. What do you say? Have you ever encountered that?
So we've actually eliminated tipping. There's no tip, there's no service charge, there's nothing added on. Tipping does not exist. So there's no way to break out the tip from the check at all. Kind of actually to address something that Art mentioned earlier, I think at the end of the day, a restaurant is a business and it has employees just like every other business. And if there's an employee that's not meeting their potential and that is not exceeding our guests' expectations, we as a business need to address that. Mm-hmm. It can't just be, every individual guest customer gets to decide, oh yeah, they were great, or oh no, they weren't great. And we have ways to receive feedback that are not just Yelp and some of those other outside third party. We have guest checks that the check is presented on, and you can actually leave feedback in the restaurant about how your experience was, and then we can utilize that to continue to coach employees and make sure that we're constantly driving the best possible hospitality that we're able to.
Okay. And in the beginning, you mentioned it a little bit, and you as well, minimum wage. And so I wanted to ask, what's the difference between a minimum wage and a living wage? Art, maybe you can answer that.
Well, minimum wage is set by the government, what you have to pay workers. Living wage is, does somebody make enough money to survive? And living wage depends on a number of things: where you live, how many people in your household, and where you live makes a big difference. So there's a difference. Minimum wage is just defined by law. Living wage is what it actually costs to have a reasonable life.
Andrea, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think that's a subjective question. Yeah, I agree.
So do you feel like your model is helping to eliminate the minimum wage and providing a living wage to, servers and?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal, is to go beyond minimum wage, to go beyond living wage, and provide a great job for everyone who works at the restaurant.
Okay, so, you're doing this new innovative thing that not a lot of restaurants are doing. How much resistance or support have you gotten from restaurants, other restaurants around?
Other restaurants,
or your fellow colleagues?
Sure, yeah. I think at the end of the day, if you talk to any restaurateur in Los Angeles right now, minimum wage is going up. It's going up dramatically. In the next 3 years, it's going to be $15 an hour, which is a huge change if you look at kind of just year over year. And everyone's really scared. The restaurant industry has incredibly slim margins as it is. Everyone's kind of grasping at straws, trying to figure out what they're going to do to create a sustainable business model. And I think almost 90%, 100% of people that I've talked to love this hospitality included model, but they are so afraid of the risks. They are afraid of the sticker shock. They are afraid of losing staff. In some restaurants, obviously not all restaurants, this is not the average, their employees taking $200, $300 home in cash. That's probably not being declared. And so changing things so that maybe everyone's paid a little bit more equitably is a challenge. And so philosophically, I think everyone supports it and everyone loves the idea, and no one really likes tipping and no one really thinks tipping is working. But to take that jump is also scary, and it's a big change, and it's a big change in consumer psychology as well. So.
Yeah, and from the customer's perspective too, do you feel like you've gained, or did you feel like you lost any of your customers? once you change that?
So, I think at the very least, anytime a guest dines with us, the very end, when they are, surprised that there's no tip line, they're pleasantly surprised. Hey, I don't have to pay an extra 20% on top of this. Like, that's great. And so overall, I think feedback has been really fantastic. People love it. What I think is a little bit harder to kind of gauge is how many guests have we lost as a result of this sticker shock. And I think the fact that we haven't been around for that long. We'd opened with a tipping model. We eliminated tipping 6 months after we opened. We're only 2.5 years old. We're in a part of downtown that is full of construction. It's 3 blocks from the Staples Center. There are cranes all over. There are street closures, and there are metered parking that has disappeared overnight. It's been a really tumultuous neighborhood to be in. And so to really, really dig into those analytics has been also part of the challenge, because we can't quite pinpoint, hey, are we losing business because of this? Are we losing business because the street was closed for 3 days? To say, oh, we lost 20% of our guests. I don't have that math, because it's not that consistent of an incline or a decline.
Okay. Have you ever experienced a rise in prices in a restaurant or a local business that you like to?
Strange you mentioned that, yes.
And how did that affect you?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a very unusual situation. There used to be a senior price for, I'm a senior. I know I don't look it, but I'm a senior. And there used to be a senior breakfast, and the senior breakfast was about $6, and it included bacon and eggs and hash browns and a glass of orange juice. Then I went in one day, the price was no longer $6, it was $9, and they eliminated the orange juice. Okay, added 1 strip of bacon, but eliminated the orange juice. So I was really upset by that. So now every time I go there once a week, I bring my own orange juice. And I ask them for a glass, or I bring in one of those bottles with a little orange juice, and I have my orange juice. But I'm still paying the extra $3. And as a result, I go there less often.
I see.
I go there less often, probably half as often as I would go for breakfast than I did before.
If you don't mind me riffing off of that really quickly, I think as minimum wage goes up, and it's not just going to impact restaurants, it's going to impact restaurants' vendors, and so our cost of goods are going to go up as well. Part of the idea with this model, too, was to create a way to continue to maintain that value. Because we've already internally figured out how we're going to pay all of our employees, yeah, maybe our prices went up to $9, but we didn't eliminate the orange juice. You don't have to tip on top of it anymore. And so out the door, what you're spending, maybe on the menu it looks a little bit more expensive. Out the door, what you're spending today and what you're going to spend 3 years from now will be the same, whereas all of our competitors are going to have to hike up their prices at least 20 to 30% in order to kind of cope with these changes. And part of the problem with that is that not only are prices going up, tip averages go up. And so all of a sudden, the front of house is making $120,000 a year. Again, not on average. This is just some of the restaurants that are in downtown, whereas the kitchen is still left behind in that.
Okay. So I have this question. There's a lot of debate if we should even tip servers at all. There's other jobs out there that aren't getting tipped. So do servers deserve to be paid more?
You could look at it from another perspective. The other perspective is, should other industries have tipping rather than should you eliminate tips? Should other industries eliminate tipping? If you buy a computer and you're really getting great service, should be able to tip the person who's showing you the computer. So, I don't think you need to just isolate the restaurant industry. You can look at it from other perspectives. Should tipping be increased in other industries?
And have you ever worked for tips?
No.
Okay.
No.
Telling.
I've never been a waiter.
I think the problem with that logic is that now we're talking about extending minimum wage as being an acceptable wage to pay everyone in more than one industry. And that's a really scary prospect, especially in California. It's a different conversation, especially with minimum wage going the way that it is. But in a state like New Jersey, where you're making $2.20 an hour because you're getting it subsidized by tips, that's unacceptable to me. In this country, you cannot afford that.
Okay. Well, my last question for today. Do you believe, I'll start with you, Art, do you believe that the hospitality included or the no tipping system will work for restaurants in the future?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I could see reasons why it would. And I know in Europe that's the rule. One of the issues, by the way, here, and I know it's happened sometime, is that if you have a no tipping system, some people, when they get their check, they don't know that it's no tipping, and so the tip is sort of included in the cycle, but they don't know that, and they just tip also. They leave a cash tip, so they're tipping twice. That could happen. So I don't know to what extent would. I imagine that could happen if some restaurants have that system and others don't. If every restaurant has that system, that wouldn't be a problem. I don't know if it would work or not. All I can speak of is from my perspective as a consumer, do I like it? That's all.
And Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially as minimum wage continues to increase and we look for ways to sort of restructure the inner workings of a restaurant, and because, unfortunately, we have been working on this tipping model for so long, restaurants have grown so accustomed to paying their front of house employees $5, $6, $7 an hour. There's a reckoning that's about to happen as states like California try to really establish very strict, hey, you have to pay everyone $15 an hour, and paid PTO and paid health care are probably coming down the pike pretty soon as well, depending on the size of your business and the city that you live in. But currently, restaurants are not structured to provide that for their employees, and that's a big problem.
Actually, Art brought up a good point. How do you let people know that this is a hospitality included? Do you have it on your menu?
We have it everywhere.
Okay.
We have it on the front page of our website. We have a sign on the door with a little bit of, so we do have these kind of logos that were actually created by Andrew Tarlow's restaurant group in New York that are pretty cool and eye-catching. So we have a logo on the door. We have a little bit of language that's right next to it that says, we provide a stable wage. It includes health benefits. We have a two-sided menu. On both sides of the menu, there is that icon as well. And then, when guests ask for their check, we provide them a little check presenter that has the logo on it,
so
has a little bit of language that says why. They get their receipt. On the receipt, it says we are a hospitality included restaurant,
oh, wow.
Something about the health benefits as well. And then, there is no tip line. And so, unfortunately, despite all of that, it isn't until something that they're very accustomed to having is taken away that it's like, oh, this is different. But yeah.
Yeah, so you make sure that
we definitely can. Yeah, it's not easy, but.
Well, that's all we have for today. I just want to thank you so much again for joining us and having this discussion. It was really good.
Okay, it was very interesting for me too.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on Santa Clarita Valley Television on Sundays at 5 and on LA 36 at 9:30 Thursday evenings. For all of us here at On Point, I'm James Farr.